have the rest of you attended my sessions before? So, yeah, mostly? Okay. All right. So I'll pick on you guys more than the usual. Okay, Bismillah. What are the... So, the title was, who's your Lord? Was it?
You didn't tell people the topic is who and what is Allah. So you can.
Got it. Okay. So today we'll just kind of go over some basics. Because it's a lot of new folks here. So, Bismillah. So why do we do dawah? I guess a question for you guys. Why are you guys here? Sorry, someone was saying something. Why are we here? Yeah.
I think it's our responsibility to spread the message of the people we know and invite people to knowledge.
Okay, sure. Have you done dawah before?
Everyone, by existing.
I love that answer. Yes. Good. Good. What else? Why is that important? Why do we care? Well, Muhammad's law, right? Like there's no disagreement. Okay. What is his whole life about? Why was he sent?
Are you okay with making notes on laptop?
Sure. What's his whole life about? Wow. Yeah. The message of Allah, the last one, right? So his whole life is about dawah, right? So in us giving dawah, we are fulfilling just a portion of what Rasulullah was sent to do, right? Now, is dawah followed on every single one of us? Yeah? Everyone say yes? So the first step haven't shown up to us this workshop we're also in right now. It's not hard? Not hard at all? Okay, so it's not kifaya. What does that mean?
Victoria on the Ummah and it's fulfilled by a specific group of people.
Okay, so the fact that you guys have shown up, the rest of the people that could have showed up, you saved them from sin. That's what fard kifaya means, right? If somebody is doing it, right? If somebody's doing it, similar to certain things in the Shariah, as long as somebody's doing it, other people are free of sin from it. But if no one does it, then everybody's to blame. Everybody falls into that sin. Okay? Yes. Yeah, what's that? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just living their life today, and most people, everyone will agree, for sisters specifically, just them living their life as dawah in 2024 in the Western context, right? As long as they're following the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Just wearing the hijab or doing certain things, they're giving dawah, whether they want to do it or not, right? For men, it's a bit different, depending on the world's in the trend now, right? So you can see a guy with a big beard, but you don't really know if the guy's Muslim or not. It's very different than when I was in university not too long ago, or quite long ago, where if you saw a big beard, generally speaking, that person was Muslim, right? But in the last 10, 15, 20 years, the beard is now a trend, so, right? But hijab is not really a trend. Hijab is like, if someone's wearing a hijab, you know they're Muslim, right? So that's why them, the sisters living their life as is dawah, technically. They're going to get asked about why they dress a certain way, why they do certain things, or not do certain things, not participate in certain things, right? With brothers, it's more, we have to kind of take more action, right? So what are the virtues of dawah? Any verses that come to mind? You can go to the next slide. Yeah. Okay, he's there. Who's doing the slides? Yeah. Yeah, there are some virtues of that. There's some virtues. Why was here? Yes.
Strengthening the presence of the Muslimin and face the non-Muslimin.
Okay, sure, but why would, what's your name? Yeah. Mahi?
Yeah.
Why would Mahi care about that?
Strengthening the presence.
Yeah.
He's Muslim or non-Muslim?
No, he's Muslim. He's Muslim, right? Yeah, okay, yeah.
Because if we don't present a united front, then people who are essentially our enemies are.
He can be like, well, why is that my business? Why do I have to take the hit for it? Let someone else. Let someone else do it. Right? So as an ummah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that the verses, next slide, that let there be a nation amongst you, right? Let there be a nation rising amongst you. Right? The way it's worded in Arabic, it's almost like an amr, it's almost like it's a command, right? A nation that commands good, forbids evil. Right? I don't like the translation of commanding good and forbidding evil as much. Because if you start to take that literally, it gets over, you can get into trouble, right? Encouraging good, right? And preventing evil. Or taking steps or facilitating the prevention of evil. That's probably the more accurate understanding. No one understands commanding and forbidding the way I was saying, right? But everyone understands it to be that you facilitate the prevention of evil, you encourage good, you encourage ma'ruf. Right? And then, the next verse. ومن أحسن قولا ممن دعا إلى الله وعمل صالحا وقال إنني من المسلمين. Who is better in speech than the one who calls to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and does good deeds and says, I am from the Muslimin. Right? Next verse.
Apparently, people in chat cannot hear you. But only as well as you're close to the podium.
Do you mind sitting here instead? Yeah.
So do I keep this on?
No,
Yes. I mean,
no, you can take it off.
we're sure that
We're sure.
I can change the slides here.
No,
No, she.
Sarah's still in charge of the slides.
Does this go down?
That one does not, this one.
But
does.
this goes up. Yeah.
That can go, yeah.
Okay, we're good. As long as this goes up.
No one.
I'll just ask chat if they hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Try speaking into this one.
Hello.
Okay, perfect, sounds good.
Perfect.
All
Sounds
right.
good. Okay.
Guess that works.
Sounds good. All right. Yeah, no, this is fine. And Allah says, Allah even tells us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even tells us how to give that, right? Ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikmati wal maw'ida, right? Invite to your Lord in a way that's with wisdom, right? That's befitting, right? And present to them an argument that's better, that's in the best way, in the best manner, right? But these are kind of telling us how to give dawah, right? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, the next slide, Ballighu anni walau ayah, right? And then we have another hadith where the Rasulullah says that if you were to guide just one person, okay, it's better for you than the best of camels. Think of, we don't ride camels anymore. What are some of the best cars that you can think of? Lambo, Ferrari, right? For someone to be guided by you is better. And that's just one person, right? And it's calling to a very selfless nature, right? Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, it's not about guiding someone with influence. It's not about guiding someone with power. It's not about guiding someone that can benefit you. You guide anyone. Anyone. It's better than the best of vehicles out there. What if you are able to? Think about what if you are able to actually guide someone who is influential, who is powerful, who can make an impact someday, right? If you can guide the next Ghazali, rahimahullah, right? How do you guide the next Ghazali? Like you teach, you help someone who's young, and that person moves on, goes on to become something influential, impactful. You are now getting the reward of all of that, right? The person who taught, think about the person who taught you how to read Quran. Who taught you how to pray? Who taught you? You okay?
Don't worry about it.
This is like clicking. Yeah. Is the sound okay or stuff?
Yeah, this isn't a sound problem anymore. Been trying to move the camera without knowing what it looks like.
Okay, fair. Yeah. So, and doesn't it reminds us of the situation when the Prophet ﷺ was told of a Jewish boy dying, passing away. Think about it. A Jewish kid passing away. He can do nothing for the Prophet ﷺ, right? He's not influential. But he heard of it. He went to go visit him. And he still tells him about Islam. That boy accepts Islam and he passes away. Can that boy benefit the Prophet at all? Can the boy benefit the Muslims at all? Right? Selfless dawah. So when we engage with people, it should have a very selfless nature to it. When I say it, what do I mean when I say that? It shouldn't be about winning arguments. It's like, yeah, I gave it to him. That's not what it's supposed to be about. Chances are, if you owned him in an argument, you've probably driven him away from Islam. Right? Rarely do you crush someone in an argument and then they end up coming around and accepting. Right? So there has to be a certain usloob, certain approach, certain mindset. Right? It has to come from a place of care. It can't come from a place of argumentation. Right? And of course, sincerity, all that stuff, those are non-negotiables along the way as well. So there's a lot of, are you guys familiar, and you guys might be very young for this, but you guys familiar with the dawah that happens on Yonge Street in Toronto? Are you?
Yep.
Yeah.
On Yonge Street, Yonge and Dundas.
We now see them in YouTube Short.
Huh?
They're still going.
I know.
Is it like the one in Young Square?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know, I haven't been there in like some years, but I remember when I was going there, they still had these.
There's a lot of people that converted in Yonge and Dundas. A lot of people. Right? But what ends up happening is that just with most convert stories, a lot of people end up converting back as well. Right? Because in the moment, in that situation when you put them through it and you can convince them, right? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but for me specifically, when I think of someone who's just going about his day or her day, right? And she's about to cross the street, a woman, or he's about to cross the street, and someone walks up to him and says, "Hey, can I talk to you for 5 minutes?" Usually I don't talk to anyone on the street. I don't know about you guys, right? Regardless of what they're coming with, even if they're giving me something free, I just walk away. But for that person to now stop and talk to a stranger and then even be convinced about a whole new way of life and accept Islam, like these stories have actually happened in Yonge and Dundas, where a person's just living her day. I know the story. This woman was just going about her day. Someone spoke to her about Islam. There was a bit of fear tactics in there as well, because he was like, "Sister, you could be crossing the street and die, and you don't know," like, that kind of stuff, which is not recommended at all. Well, I'm just telling you, for the sake of the story. And she converted right then and there. She accepted Islam right then. She was like, I left my house today to go buy my dress for my engagement, etc. And this one instant now changes her whole life. Right? But why is it able to do that? That's the power of the religion that we're part of. That's the power of Islam. When the Prophet ﷺ went to Abu Bakr Siddiq, there was nothing required, right? He already had the light in his heart. He was ready to accept. We hear that story. We hear the story of Ali bin Abi Talib where he accepts right away, right? But then we get amazed when it happens in front of us or not too far from us. But they're still happening. These stories still happen, right? With the caveat, I'm adding the caveat that a lot of converts actually convert back because they don't get the support, right? They usually get abandoned by their families, all kinds of things, right? Usually any one of those 10 things is enough to make someone depressed and send them in a different course, right? Imagine now all of those things happening. Your family is pressuring you and like you don't even have a community and right? Maybe now there's more of a community, but 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and this young and Dundas Dawah thing has been around for a long time. For a long time. Maybe in the late 90s. Okay. Why do we care? Why is the issue, what's the big deal? Why do we care about bringing people to the deen? Why do we care about giving dawah? Okay, so now we established that the Quran and the Sunnah encourages us to do it. But what is the essential reason? What is the underlying reason of why? Why? Go ahead.
Allah Azza wa Jalla told us the Prophet an example for us. And this example is rahmatan lil alameen,
Okay.
mercy for mankind.
Okay.
And we should, of course, try and embark on a journey to be also mercy for mankind by doing the same job in guiding people towards khair.
I heard a lot of shoulds in there. Like we should. So we don't have to.
Here's what I honestly have been taught. Of course, you can correct me if I'm wrong, right? Yeah. I don't believe that, of course, dawah is well. In that sense, not everybody's going to do
Okay.
conscious.
You mean not everyone needs to do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Needs to do it.
Yeah.
But for those who are, learning and choosing
Yeah.
to learn, for them, they have.
They have to? So you have to.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So in what situation do you think someone who's learning, it might be fard on them to get involved with dawah related things or Islamic related things?
Depends on what their teacher has allowed them to teach, allowed them to get down.
Okay. So let me give you so there might be one situation where it might be fard on someone like you, as you are the ex-president, right? Of the MSA? Ex-president of as the ex-president of the MSA, as someone who sat through dawah sessions, as someone who may know some Arabic, at what point can it become fard on you? We kind of went on a tangent right now, but
Yeah. At what point?
Yeah.
Good question. At some point, I used to not know, right? And then, there were a couple people that would tell me.
You're going on a tangent right now.
At what point? Honestly, I don't know.
Okay. So at the point when there's nobody else, there's no one else, and you're the one that needs to step up, right? So that might be a case in all of our lives. If you're a practicing Muslim, that might be a case in all of our lives at a certain point. We might be with a family member, we might be in a situation where we're the only ones that know what should be done, and then it becomes obligatory on us to do it, to take that action. Question one, question two. So yeah.
Like talking about okay, if we have to, we should. But my question is why not? What we keep talking about we have to do it or something, so we just thought about
Yeah. So why does
why wouldn't you want to be part of
You're right, I agree, but when we use that language, we're still talking about kind of something extra. Right? Think about, you guys are the da'is, those who are being given dawah, the mad'u, right? People who are being given dawah. Why is it important for you? What's the big deal? Yes.
Maybe the opportunity to help someone, like, you could get the word.
Okay, yeah, I agree, but what's at stake?
Like, you have the choice to make good or bad decisions. If you like help somebody that could benefit from your knowledge, then that's only gonna increase your reward.
Okay, agreed, all of that. But what's the big deal? Why? What's the,
No one's there enough to be asked about every single thing that happens. Not. But then, let's say, for example, you're put in a position in which you want to to help someone.
Yeah.
You don't help that person. That's liable on you, so that I could use the grace to on the skills of doing that. Those not necessarily typically doing it. Oh, but it's not. If it's kind of, this makes me uncomfortable, therefore I shouldn't do it. But it's more so there are points in time where it's like, not.
okay, so follow-up question to that. Why did the Prophet ﷺ rush to this young boy who was dying? What's at stake here? No, yeah, everyone, but I'm gonna get some new people involved. Yes.
The little boys, like the boys.
The boy's akhirah is at stake. That's why it matters. That's why this topic is important. Right? That's why, that's like, I agree with everything what you guys said. We should, we could, right? Like, why not? Okay, these are nice to haves. But what's in stake for the person being called to? Like, that person might end up in the hellfire. Right? And usually I like to read out a really long hadith, but I don't, for time, I'll save it for the next class. This hadith about how in Musnad Ahmed, where if a person passes away, how the angels come and take his soul. And if it's a good soul, right, this soul gets registered basically in the heavens, 7 heavens. And the angels are taking that soul up. And as the angels are taking that soul, if it was a good soul, if it was soul of a mu'min, then there's a nice smell to it. And the angels passing by ask, what is this nice smell? Who is this person? If it was a bad soul, it has a filthy smell to it. Who is this filthy person, right? And then both are ending up where? 6 feet under. And then for the one who's pious, a man shows up in the form of his good deeds. The one who wasn't Muslim, someone shows up in the form of a punishment. That's at stake. That's why it matters, right? Cool. And that's something you have to, when we're giving dawah, that's something we need to communicate, right? Most people today, if you ask them, have you thought about why we're why we're here? You can't even use the word created sometimes, right? Why are we here? What's the purpose in life? The very person who is super productive, self-help, self-improvement, right? Making every minute count, making every initiative count, right? Everything has a purpose. Will argue with you that the whole life has no purpose. Is that not true? A lot of times, right? The very productive people, everything, like university, you see it all the time, right? Everything has a purpose, everything has a reason, right? But then our life has no reason. Our life is just ashwayan. Our life is just whatever, right? Or the agnostic would say, I really don't know. I don't have the ability to know, to understand, right? So as long as I don't know, khalas, this is what it is, right? So there's a lot at stake here so if you cannot awaken that, if you cannot make someone feel that urgency, or if anything close to that urgency, then all this dawah, everything you're going to tell them about Islam is just going to be, it's cool, it's nice, it's cute. Am I right? Does that make sense? Right? So it has to come from that perspective. Another thing that needs to, yeah, you can go to the next slide. Sorry. You had a question? Yes.
Correct. Also think of it as Allah's help over us in the sense that if we are happy or we are pleased, presume that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guided us. So it's like if you do you not have a sense of duty or that idea in your mind that there's many people, many injustices that take place, and the foremost of them is that Allah's majesty is not being acknowledged in the first place. Now, on the individual or societal scale. So it's like as a group, yes, we have that idea of if there are some guys or organizations working towards dawah, that's the case. But the reason it matters in the individual relationship is because if, like Lenin said, the sister, what do you call it? If a person has a lack of knowledge of what's there, then it's Allah's right over you that you use what He has gifted you for others. And if you don't use it, then it's idle, right? So it's also matters of Allah's right over you, not just the personal. Yes, the personal punishment aspect is obviously like very important, but I mean to say like you have to use it, and you have to use the knowledge, otherwise it's impotent in you. Am I making sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It still wouldn't get to the level of being fard on every single individual until or unless they're in a situation where they're the only one.
For example, like perhaps I'm confusing the definitions, right?
Yeah.
But when you know someone like a family member and they don't say, I don't know, they didn't know that eating a certain thing was haram.
Yeah.
So then, or they didn't know that acting a certain way or saying something was haram or halal. So then it would be dawah for you to
Absolutely.
close the gap.
Close
So
the
then in that case, on the that's what I meant by the individual obligation.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like going out on the street. Every single person.
Yeah, so in that situation, it can become fard, right? But it's also responsibilities, right? So if you are like the elder brother, elder sister, and you have other siblings under you, right? Then you have a responsibility, right? If you're a husband, you have a responsibility over your family, right? If you're a wife, you have a responsibility over the kids, etc., etc. So if things fall into your direct responsibility, then yes, it's fard on you, right? But I was asking in the form of like dawah to the community in general. Yeah. A lot of times, yes, family, extended family, if they don't know something, yeah, you should be trying to keep them safe, especially if you know that they don't know something and you know that they'll care about, right? A lot of times if they're not praying, they're not doing anything, and then you're trying to tell them, hey, by the way, this is haram, like chances are they're not gonna. Yeah. Is there a question here? No? Okay. All right, cool. All right. We're really behind on time, but let's go 10 more minutes and open up the floor. Does that make sense?
Like an hour more. So
Yeah, no, I gotta go.
no.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let's I'm not sure if we can cover all of it, but we can at least talk about it. All right. So let's say what's your name, brother? Yeah. Muhammad. Okay. Let's say you meet someone and in the dawah booth, right? And you're telling them about Islam. And they just say that, okay, but that's your perspective. How do you respond to that?
Their perspective, but it's their ethic and it's perspective from Islam. Because at the end of the day, it could be their perspective, but how do they know for sure that their perspective is correct?
Okay, good. So now you can, so your perspective, my perspective, there's got to be one right perspective. Does that make sense? There's got to be one thing that there's got to be an objective truth at the end of the day, right? If we're all playing the game of perspectives, then we just end up with nothingness, right? Correct? it's kind of like, I mean, growing up in Canada, we're kind of used to that. We celebrate everyone's background, everyone's culture, everyone's beliefs, right? Oh, that's really nice that you have this belief. We believe something else. And then, it's almost like you have a portion of the truth and we have a portion of the truth. And that's reality of some sort, right? But when it comes to certain things in society, such as murder, such as crime or like theft, everyone agrees that this is wrong, right? All of a sudden, there's one reality when it comes to that, right? But in religious things, it's almost like there's multiple realities, right? So if we're talking to someone who has that mindset, which is a lot of people, by the way, even Muslims have that mindset, right? Muslims have that mindset, unfortunately. You cannot really tell them right or wrong anymore. You cannot tell them good and bad anymore, right? Because that's just your perspectives. I was going for Eid Salah sometime this year. And I'm going down the elevator. There's a woman that walked in. And she saw me dressed up in a thobe and everything. So she was like, "Oh, it's Eid, isn't it?" I'm like, yeah, it's Eid. So she goes, "I'm Muslim too." But she's like, but I practice in my own way. Right? I was in a rush. I'm like, okay, cool, Eid Mubarak. Right? But that is the perspective, unfortunately, for a lot of Muslims, right? It's almost like I'm Muslim too, you're Muslim. You practice your way, I practice my way. You have your perspectives, I have my perspectives. And even in my family, I have a lot of atheists in my family. They're very much, their understanding of reality is kind of like that. Like they'll respect you. You're a religious guy, they'll respect you, you pray. But then they expect the equal respect as well for their views and the fact that they think all of what you're doing is nonsense. Right? So, and you can't really argue with a person like that. You can't argue with that mentality. Unless you can agree on a fact that there's got to be, like, you have to believe that there's something called the truth. There's something called the reality, right? There's something called like objectivity. If everything is subjective, then how do we ever agree on anything in life, right? How is society ever going to function? Does that make sense? Yeah, go ahead.
So that an example, like I believe in Toronto, there's a lot of LGBT-friendly mosques or something.
I don't know about a lot. It's like one and maybe two. Yeah.
People are just trying to like tailor Islam to their own like desires and.
Have you had experiences with that community here? Yeah. And how did that experience go? We're all being recorded.
People who are affiliated with vaguely interesting backgrounds, but they themselves are open-minded. So for example, they come with a subjective perspective, but they say, but if you can tell me I'm wrong, I will be glad to hear you. Where other people are, for example, not going to name any names, but certain faculty, where they straight up say, we are Muslim and, but also we believe in liberalism, or also we believe that we're feminists, or also we support LGBT rights.
Okay.
And so their students will come to us and say confused things like, do you know any non-binary Muslims on campus? And we'll say, if they feel this way, they don't declare themselves as such. So that's.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is the case of, so I'm just trying to understand how deep have these conversations gone? Like, is there are they taking a specific interpretation of Surah Lut?
So, okay, so the faculty I was referring to are in fact affiliated with the LGBT mosque. So
They
for
are
example,
affiliated.
They host events that are collabing with LGBT right organizations that are secular.
Yeah.
And they also do things like lead female imams, like female imams leading a prayer.
Okay.
And things like that, and mixed jamaat.
Okay,
Like
gotcha. In campus as well?
No.
Okay.
In their.
Okay. Yeah, so you're, again, same issue, right? You cannot give dawah to a group like that unless you can agree on, right? There's got to be one right opinion here, right? It can, especially when they're polar opposites. When the two options are absolute polar opposites, it's not a matter of perspective anymore. Like it's either right or wrong, or it's either haram or it's not, right? Or it's either kufr or it's not, right? It's not like, oh, your perspective is half kufr, my perspective is like 10% kufr or something. Like it's not.
Objective truth.
You need something to agree on, right? You cannot go along with this idea of like, we see this verses this way because we felt like it, and we interpret this verses this way because, right? So what is your reference point? So our reference point is our Shariah. Our reference point is the Quran and Sunnah. Our reference point is our thousands of years of over 1,000 years of scholarship, right? And why is that important? Important because, right? It's a weak hadith, but Prophet said, "Ittabi'u sawad al-adam," the great majority. Follow the great majority, right? And we know the Quran is mahfuz, it's protected, right? And Allah doesn't say that we will protect the Quran, right? We being that's a ta'zim, that he himself. He says he will protect the dhikr. Dhikr is not just the Quran. Dhikr is the whole, it's more than just a book. Dhikr is more comprehensive than that. So the scholars say Sunnah is part of that, right? Anything to do with religion is part of that. Allah will protect the religion itself. So if you believe that Islam is the truth, and this is for the LGBTQ sometimes, like this community, if you believe that Islam is the truth, and you believe that Allah protected the religion, then why is it that instead of following the great majority, you guys are the great minority? Does that make sense? Right? Right then and there, I mean, that's a logical argument. Right? Okay. Is there any questions? Should we open it up to questions? Should we open it up to questions?
Following this, pictures having siblings that are taught like about LGBT school. So as an older sibling, how could you like tell the Islamic perspective? I think lay people are not like scholars, so maybe like having something to make sure your siblings aren't following the Western.
Good question. I haven't had to personally deal with this myself. So it might be better if you ask someone who have siblings who have been able to deal with this. So from my inexperienced perspective, I would say that we have responsibilities to our siblings before even the school even gets to them. Does that make sense? So before they're even fed that, you feed your version of it, right? Just like we teach kids Tawheed, right? They're not gonna go, we don't wait for them to go to school and hear Trinity and then teach our Tawheed. We teach our Tawheed first, right? And then we kind of arm them as to like, well, where's Allah? Like, what is it that we believe in, et cetera, et cetera. We pray, right? So that by the time the kid goes to school or your sibling goes to school, he or she are already ready to not accept that, not be brainwashed with that. Now, with the LGBTQ issue specifically, anyone who has siblings can confirm maybe. I think there's an issue of if they start speaking and saying certain things these days, right? In school, and then the teacher gets involved and, right? Do you have siblings? You're the youngest? Okay, you don't count. So who has young siblings here? Okay. So that is a real issue, right? So if they start, yeah. So you have to also be careful about that. Right? So tone it down a bit, maybe. Tone down that message. Yes.
So, my sister is grade 5 in elementary school.
Okay.
And she tells me that that the school has a club where they give little kids candies and basically give them a bit of greed to join these student clubs where they're promoting LGBTQ stuff. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, and this is like maybe 9-10 years old. So at what point and at what level should they understand Tawheed?
I mean, by 9-10, we should be teaching them Tawheed earlier than that, like 5-6. Yeah, not wait till 9-10.
obligation that you should start mandating that your children start praying.
By 7, by 7. Yeah.
You're praying for 7.
Yeah. That stuff should start a lot earlier. But it's not too late, right? But I'm just saying that it should start a lot earlier. It's funny they do that now because I remember they used to give us candy to join the chess club. And I started loving the chess club. That's how I learned how to play chess. But yeah, that's where their focus was back then. Yeah, go ahead.
I just had a follow-up.
Yeah.
So she does pray and she goes to Islamic school. So she is having like, I guess there is a sort of tawheed right there, right? Because she's learning from Islamic school and they teach her all this stuff.
Yeah.
But it's also about like the kind of the values that you get, I guess, like the more liberal type of mindset you get. So how do we make sure that, you know,
So we teach Islam, unfortunately, as a ritual, right? And this is not I'm not meaning that as a derogatory way. I was taught that as a ritual too. But we don't teach Islam as a worldview. We need to teach Islam as a worldview, right? How you see the world. Your understanding of Islam dictates how you see the world. Now imagine when you're teaching a child that's so foundational, it will have effects down the road. I remember asking an intricate Aqidah question to a group of people. So it was a group of adults and they brought their kids. And I remember asking them a question. It was very nuanced. None of the adults got the answer. This 80-year-old answered the question. Right? So they're also very pure with fitrah, and like they're less corrupted at 8 years old and 9 years old versus these adults at 30, 40 and like teenagers or 20s. Yeah. Go ahead.
What about the case for maybe mid-teenagers and cousins and stuff like that?
Okay.
When you find that, of course, they didn't have the prerequisites of knowledge. Like,
Yeah.
you also want to get them to know, like, they understand these things and just glad they're in. There's some good ways to instill that in them whilst the person is still in high school and stuff.
So it depends on what's missing. It depends on what's missing, right? Like you start from the top and work your way down. Right? Similarly, I think to what she was alluding to, like they're not praying, but then they're praying. Okay. If they're praying, that's a huge progress. So you're saying their understanding might be a bit off? Yeah. So you can start having like real discussions about like how Islam is not just a ritual, right? It's a way of life. And I would say it's beyond a way of life. Because you can have Islam as a way of life because of your surrounding, but if your worldview is not Islam, right, then it doesn't count for much. But you can have worldview if your worldview is there and you understand Tawheed well, right? And this is a bit of an oxymoron, but you're not as practicing. That person is much more impactful than the person who's doing a lot, but the foundations are all covered up with liberalism, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So, well, yeah. Yes. Okay.
I'm not knowledgeable enough. Like, I guess the thing is that one, but towards the Muslim, but like in that situation.
Yeah.
how about advising someone when you feel like you're not necessarily the most knowledgeable, but you feel like you're the only one have to advise somebody.
Is this I mean, will this person accept your advice? That's a very important question, right? Because people that might not be too religious might have multiple people advising them unsolicitedly. It's all unsolicited. So then that becomes a bit of they might feel harassed at that point, right? So you want to be careful about that, because if that person feels harassed, they might start moving further away from religious people. And I'm speaking from experience, like high school MSAs to like university MSAs, etc. We have to make space for people who are not as practicing. We have to make them feel welcome, right? And and be careful about how we approach this practice, this idea of commanding the good. It's a responsibility, sure, but how you go about it, right? There's a lot of times, and like I said, like within my own family, extended family of cousins, I would see certain people do something, I'm not going to say anything. Because I know that person is not going to listen to my advice. Because from the very fact that he's my cousin and I'm his cousin, he's not going to take me seriously. Right? So you want to use avenues that actually work versus bother people. Yeah.
Sometimes my experience, like let's say I would not follow him, then you have like I have to do something or I shouldn't do something and I didn't follow like the planning way. It's because you don't trust Allah. Sometimes you feel like doing things your way is gonna reap you more gain and reward, and you're gonna get more likely. So, versus if you feel like you do it the way Allah wants it, because you feel like, oh, that's just not, you don't trust Allah. So it can be important to remind others that even though it may be hard to follow Allah, like let's say from hijab for women, because a lot of women rely on their feelings. Oh, I don't feel like wearing hijab. If you just trust Allah, you're gonna get more life. You're gonna get more barakah.
Yeah, and I think that goes back, that kind of goes back to society as well. And anyone who has experience going back home and visiting home, as in like home countries. Okay, how do they treat religious people there? Your situation might be the only exception in this whole thing. Are you going back to UAE?
Riyadh,
Okay, yeah, that doesn't count. Where do you visit?
Algeria.
Maybe. Yeah.
I think Pakistan.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Pakistan.
definitely. Definitely, yes. Okay, so the story of Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, I'm from Bangladesh. It's like if you're religious, you probably smell, you're probably poor, you're probably not that educated, right? Right? That is sort of the thing, and it's almost and it's unfortunately it is a fact. Like people, when they have like a lot of kids, for example, the kid who is the least successful in school, we're like, okay, this kid I'm sacrificing for the madrasas. This is how they think. It might seem absurd to you right now, but believe me, they might not say it out loud, but this is the mentality that's going in their head, right? And to the even within my family network, for example, or the outer society in general, I feel that in Canada, right? Like if the fact that you've studied Islam or you've gone somewhere, you've studied for many years, they would assume that, okay, can this person really have a job? Like they'll be surprised that I have a full-time job or like I have another career, for example, right? Because the understanding is that it's always the weakest guys getting into Islamic studies, right? And that's where some of that comes from. That idea that like, Allah wants me to do things a certain way, but then if I do it, am I going to lose out on the dunya, right? This constant struggle. And you might be able to relate to with Riyadh. I had a student, so I moved to Saudi as a teacher. I was teaching for 2 years at a university. I had a student, and then I became a student actually, because I became a student of Islamic sciences. I had a student who was in the engineering department, and he was just terrible. Like he's like very nice guy, very religious guy. Okay, terrible at English that I was in English class. I don't know about other subjects. I met this guy 3 years later at the university that I was studying in. And he's like, teacher, I know this guy. So he thinks I'm his teacher, right? Obviously I'm not telling him I'm a student now. He's like, I'm studying Shariah now. You guys get it? You can probably relate to it. He moved on to Shariah because he couldn't handle engineering. So think about that. Like part of it is society's fault. Part of it is also our fault. We have automatically programmed ourselves to think the weakest of us are the ones who are religious or the ulama, for example. Yeah.
I actually had a question relating to that. Like, I know someone from my family, like, alhamdulillah, now their life is different. But back when they were a teenager, maybe like 30, 40 years ago, they started going to the masjid in Ramadan. Because everyone was going, there's a brand new masjid built, so he just started going to the masjid for prayers.
Yeah.
And at that time, he wasn't doing so well at school. So somebody said to him, "Oh, like he's coming to the masjid now, he's like praying and everything. His grades aren't good, let's turn him into a Maulana. Like it's like we make him like a."
Because we need the weakest students to get
Yeah.
into Islamic studies,
So,
right? Yeah.
because of that, stopped going to masjid for many years. Now the question related to that was I was already gonna ask before you said this, but for somebody like that, and that was a long time ago, but I know people now that have a similar experience with, like, let's say one bad experience with somebody or something.
Yeah.
With a religious Muslim person.
Yeah.
And somehow they've closed themselves off from Islam so much.
Yeah.
How do you approach, like, giving dawah to such a person, or like how do you open up that person's heart?
I mean, a lot of these people, like, I can relate to that. I have cousins in the UK who are, I mean, I hope they're never going to see this video, but I have cousins in the UK where very similar situation. Like they had Maulana Saab back when they were a kid. I think he beat them up or something, like, and then they never wanted to go back to him. Like they don't. So even when they pray or even when they fast, they don't want to go to the masjid because going to the masjid is equated in their head as so much trauma that they must have gone through as a kid. But here's the irony of it all, though. This attitude isn't present in their professional life, right? In your profession, in your career, you meet so many difficult people, but you work you figure out a way around it. You have difficult bosses, you figure out a way around it. You're not shutting shop and you're sitting at home saying, "Oh, it was a traumatic experience. I'm just gonna close shop and not deal with anyone," right? People are perfectly okay with dealing with traumatic events. When I say traumatic, I don't mean extremely traumatic. I mean issues like this, right? In our workplace, in our careers, in our university. But then when it comes to the mosque, like, no, I can't do it anymore, right? So I feel like that's a bit of a cop-out, right? Maybe I'm being insensitive, but I personally feel like that's a bit of a cop-out. So you need to kind of remind them that, okay, like, what do you usually do with difficult people? Do you just come back home and not deal with them, or do you actually deal with them, right? It'll be different if they're doing it with everybody, and that's a bigger problem.
I'll follow to that. Like I mean, it's kind of the point where it's like, okay, difficult people, but that person that I was talking about, they only really reconnected with Islam when they moved out of Pakistan. And they were in Pakistan and they moved out, and then they saw a different kind of community, different thing. Where they were, they felt that this was everyone. This is how these entire Islamic communities, the religious people.
Correct. Yeah.
So like it wasn't something that's like isolated to a person or an event, where they felt like they could, like, like you're saying with profession, like navigate it. Yeah. So how do you like?
Well, so he's leading a religious life now, right?
Yeah. 'Cause
Okay,
he
so
moved out of Pakistan and then.
okay, he's good.
saw something new.
What do you want him to do?
I mean, I'm not talking about for him, but I mean, like, that situation.
Yeah, I mean that happens a lot. That happens a lot. People move out of their home country, they become more religious because when they go to like a Western country, they start feeling what they're now missing, right? They don't feel the blessings of what was there in a Muslim country, right? One of the things that, like, I when I first moved to Saudi Arabia, one of the things that really struck out to me was like the public adhan. Like the adhan's public and you hear it and like, wow, like this is what I've been missing all this time, right? But if I was growing up back home in my country, I spent my first 10 years there. I never cared about that. I never even thought about it. But I definitely heard adhan there as a child. And we went to the mosque. We went to to pray in the mosque every now and then. But that stuff never clicked until you come to Canada and then there's nothing, right? And then when you go back to that environment, you start to appreciate more of that. It's very common. Sure. Okay, yeah.
Someone was saying it's question/comment. I learned previously that whenever it comes to doing dawah with non-Muslims, that we should always start with what we and the non-Muslim have in common. Is that correct?
Start with what we have in common. Yeah, I think that's a good approach.
Even when I did not switch language, it's still in English. I
Yeah.
did not do that, but even might I challenge you on this point?
I was gonna say that sometimes when you start with too much commonalities, then you fail to build the point of why they should be Muslim.
Yeah, it's like
Right.
perennialism. It's like, well, I'm true and you're true.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So you might be walking into one of those situations when you do that. Commonality is good, but you have to pivot towards, okay, now what makes us different? Okay, why we believe that our religion is the exclusive one for salvation.
Open the door with commonality.
You can open the door with commonalities, get them
but
in.
skip it this time.
Yeah, yeah. How does marketing work? How does an advertisement work? What happens in the marketing world? So you probably do not want to think of a product. Give me a product.
Kleenex.
Yeah, he probably doesn't want to buy Kleenex, right? Because he wants his mom to buy it. But they will get him with a quiz, right? What's your Kleenex personality? And now your name is Abdullah. Now Abdullah loves quizzes. He's like, oh, it's a quiz, another quiz. Let's take it. Okay. Now they have his email, right? Then they'll send him something so they know his answers in the quiz. They'll start sending him things that he likes. Eventually, he's going to start buying Kleenex that he didn't even want to buy Kleenex. Right? That's a bad example. Kleenex is probably not a good example, but a lot of products are like that, right? Why do we scroll randomly? They'll get us with something, right? I'm in marketing, so I'll get you with something that you like, and then I'll eventually get you to buy something that you shouldn't have liked. That's how it works. So that commonality is kind of like that.
And then I'll move on.
Yeah.
So if I were to put an example to your point, would it be accurate to say, like, say, for example, we're talking to a Christian,
Yeah.
like a Catholic, someone who, and not a Catholic as in they actually believe there's no purpose to life or that personal life is happy, like an actual Catholic.
Okay.
This person obviously has emotional attachment to at least the idea of Isa alayhi salam and his mother. Because they have it in all of their worship, they have it in all of their gatherings, they mention him constantly. Meaning that an easy open door would be, we also care about, like, establish the emotional connection.
Yeah.
Where you care about Isa alayhi salam, so do we. But if you also care about who you believe is the father, then shouldn't you give the father his rights? This is give Isa alayhi salam his rights. And then you start with, yes, the emotional part, but then you take it and you kind of put it in the Islamic lens. So you take the
Yeah.
Islam.
So you can start off with like how I would do it right off the bat, what comes to my head. I would talk about how, have you ever heard of the cartoons, the Muhammad cartoons, right? We would not allow that for Isa alayhi salam, for Jesus either. And here are the reasons why, right? So right away you've built a connection, right? So it's like you equally care about Jesus as much as you care about your own prophet. But it's like, no, it's not just our own prophet. Jesus is one of our prophets too, right? And then you want to take it to how you understand Jesus and what Jesus is in, Isa alayhi salam is in Islam. You make that pivot, like you said.
We care more about Jesus than you guys do, yet we don't worship him. Then that's where they're.
Yeah, I mean, that might come off a little aggressive, but you want to pivot to that point. Yeah, if you can pivot to that, that's good.
The other question is saying that basically they're confused as to this idea of the subcontinent where weak people go into Islam or people who have nothing to do with the dunya go into Islam because Arabic grammar is not for the weak.
Exactly, and hence where we are right now. A lot of weak people go into Islam and they don't do the right job, right? Yeah.
Then there's a third question, sorry, what you call it, where people say, how do I respond to people who question the idea that every Abrahamic religion says they are correct? Why is Islam special?
Good. That's an amazing question. Is the person asking how do you address it?
Yeah, like how do I respond to people who don't understand? Basically, they're like every Abrahamic religion says they're special.
Okay, so then you look at the polar contradictions in each of these Abrahamic religions and how one thing is allowed in the other one religion, the other one is not allowed, right? In the same religion. You look at the stories and the contradictions. We're going to get into that in the coming weeks. But the stories don't even align, right? The Bible has a certain narrative of Isa alayhi salam. We have a certain narrative of Isa alayhi salam. There are commonalities, there are similarities, but in essence, they're different. One, he's God in one, he's part of God in one, he's just a prophet in the other one. So the other one says he's an heretic, right? So there's contradictions. There's no place for reconciliation between the three. So there has to be one that's the true narrative. It's not like two of them align and the other one's off. All three of them are like very distinctly different. There's huge contrast. Yes, go ahead. Last question.
That one needs to be, have a good character. Oh, by the way, I have a good character from your mannerism and stuff like that. Is that enough for now, or you have to, at some point?
I mean, I would go beyond that. I personally would go beyond that. Recently, there was kind of an old friend of mine who accepted Islam. Okay. And he started thinking about this because his mom recently passed away, and then he started thinking about death. It was a difficult period for him. And he grew up with Muslims. He grew up with Muslims. He's even like showed up to a mosque and prayed with Muslims, even when he was not a Muslim. Right? Because he was just like, yeah, it was just my friends. You know, people, here's the thing, like we think of these things as really weird. It was very common for people to walk into a church with a friend and like, even though you don't believe and stuff like that. I mean, we know that, right? So his mom passed away. He started thinking about his religion more. Who does he turn to first? The Muslims, right? Starts inquiring and stuff. And he was a Hindu before. So Hinduism never really made sense to him anyways, right? And then because he had so much access to Muslims, he became Muslim very fast, right? I can see how if my friends were pushy with him, this might have gone the wrong direction, right? So you have to, there's no one right answer. It really depends on how well you know a person. Some people are outgoing, some people are introverts, right? So if you're outgoing, you're able to tap into different connections, which an introvert cannot tap into, right? So then it's not the job of the introvert to then even try. For the one who's outgoing, who's good with people, then you want to get to know your friends. You can tap into different levels of thought as to like, hey, what do you guys believe? How come you guys do this? And like, without coming off offensive. Whereas the introvert might just come off very dry and just offensive, right? So it really depends from person to person. But yes, there's definitely, to some extent, there should be something there. Whether that could be something as basic as just explaining what you do and how you pray. Unsolicited. Right? Just to make a point, right? As long as they don't feel that aggressiveness.
In the same light, because there's the question from earlier about siblings, right? Being a family, especially if they're younger than you, or if they're a category of family that is like, okay, you are actually a fetus, I refuse your advice. Isn't the idea that a lot of dawah, or like at least 60% of it, is just building a rapport with a person?
Of course.
So, for example, there was a friend I had, non-Muslim, who I never got to the Islam conversation until years of literally just we go out to eat, we talk, etc. So when she got comfortable, then she would discuss religion, etc., and ask questions on her own unprompted. But if I had not already established that rapport, she doesn't want to talk to someone she doesn't know, or that she doesn't know has their best interest in mind. Where there are other people where I try to have the same conversation, even if they're a family.
It's not like a dawah booth
Yeah.
interaction. So a dawah booth interaction, the person is already coming with some sort of interest, some sort of question. Usual friends in classes, they're not at the same level, right? You know how they say in marketing, meet the prospect where they are. If they're not there, why are you going to push it on them? It might have an opposite effect.
So acts of kindness with an idea of dawah, like dawah is
Yeah.
a motivation for acts of
Yeah.
kindness.
Yeah.
Because you might open them to asking, why are you generous? Or why are you like this?
Yeah, and like I said, a lot of it's about how you approach it, right? Hey, I bought some baklava for you. You know, back home, when we have Eid, we have a lot of baklava. I'm just making this up as I'm going along, right? This could all be just because I don't know if people have baklava back home, right? Oh, but we have this when we have Eid, you know, that religious celebration we have once a year, and like, because you know we pray to one God and stuff like that. You see how I'm just kind of just slipping things in, right? And I'm not expecting anything from the other person as I'm slipping it in. I'm just trying to see and gauge if there's interest or. It's like sales. It essentially is like sales. Yeah. I don't know why you're laughing. It is sales. It is literally sales. If you're good at sales, you'll be good at that one. There's no doubt about it.
Any last questions? Does anyone else have anything ever they want to ask? Take now forever hold your peace.
Cool. So we didn't really get through much, which is fine. I think questions were good questions as well. So we'll continue. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.